Okay, now we're recording.
Yep.
Yeah. So, what did Toomey tell you about the whole thing?
He didn't say a lot. He just said that you wanted to talk a little bit about politics and whatever, and I'm fine. I mean,
Okay.
if you check me out, you'll see I have no problem ruffling anybody's feathers. I'm, with Classic Metal Show especially, my other show, I go at it, and I don't care. I as far as political leaning, I don't know that I have a political leaning. I'm pro killing babies, and I'm pro gun, and I'm pro everything. I'm definitely.
Well, you definitely don't mind ruffling feathers.
No, I don't. I do not.
Wow.
I'm not. And even with the abortion thing, it's if you want to get an abortion, fine. Just don't make up words to hide from what you're doing. You're killing babies. So
wow. Well, thank you for that. I mean, that's one of the things that kind of, we'll get into that. I'd like to get into that, but that's one of the things that kind of drives me crazy. And I've had these discussions with people, and my main thing when I talk about these kind of things with people is like, let's be very honest about exactly what it is we're talking about. It's like, let's not disguise things with terminology. Let's get down to the nitty gritty of exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly.
So, like I said, we'll get to that. But so here's the thing. I hate to ask you this because, have we, this is going to sound funny. Have we met before?
Yes, we have.
Not on the podcast we just did.
No. But Mojo.
Okay.
When you guys, I'm a huge fan of Stuck Mojo.
Thank you.
I came out to see you guys, 5, 6, 7 times. We're gonna go old school here. We're both gonna justify our white beards.
Oh, that's fine.
but the first time I saw you guys was at the World Series of Metal in Cleveland when you opened for Bruce Dickinson.
Ah, okay, yeah.
And then several times when you guys played at the Ron's Crossroads in Akron, Ohio. I came out to all those shows. I pretty much saw Stuck Mojo every time you came to Cleveland through Declaration, I guess. I went and saw the band. So I'm a big fan, man. I love the band.
Well, thank you. Is there, I hope I have the city right. Is it Bogarts?
That's Cincy. Cincinnati.
Is that in Cincinnati?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. I had that wrong. That was, I know Fozzy played there a couple years ago. Yeah, that was always, I love that venue. I didn't know if maybe you'd seen us there or not. I apologize for getting the cities wrong.
No, I think I saw you in Columbus at maybe one of the Rock on the Range. In fact, it was Rock on the Range. It was
yeah.
Was that 2014, I think, or something like that? Yeah, I saw
a few years later.
Then. Yeah, I was more a Mojo guy than a Jericho guy, although I am a wrestling guy too. I watch wrestling like a lunatic, so
okay.
Well,
this is go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so this is you are my inaugural podcast guest.
Nice. Okay.
This is my very first time doing this. Obviously, you can tell from how low tech I am. This is something I've always wanted to do.
Sure.
But I never did because, my opinions are my own. And, I'm like you in that I want to talk about things, or at least I have an interest in talking about things that can be controversial. And I didn't want to bring, bring trouble on anybody that I'm working with. I'm just the drummer in a band. And, if I start a podcast and God forbid it actually becomes popular and people actually hear what I have to say,
sure.
I don't want it to bring controversy on anybody else. And I love talking about these things. I wouldn't call myself a political junkie, but I consider myself a curious person. And I'm interested in talking about reality and the world and why we believe the things we believe. And so I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I wouldn't necessarily say that like Joe Rogan is my hero. Even though I admire what he's done in this world and I just like his approach, which is just having a long form conversation with somebody and nothing is off the table. And
absolutely.
I've wanted to do this kind of thing for a long time, and I'm finally just, throwing the boat in the water, and I'm either going to row it across the lake, or I'm going to fall out and sink to the bottom, and
Right.
and fall on my face. So I was actually I had arranged for somebody else to do this at 3:00 today. And I
Okay.
had talked to Toomey about having you on, because
Sure.
I've been trying to line up people. And so when it kind of fell apart with he and I was like, well, I wonder if Chris would be willing to just jump on and do it.
Sure.
And
I'm
so,
game, man. I'm always game, and believe me, as far as the ruffling feathers and whatnot, I'm in such a unique position. I own a couple of businesses, but I own them.
right, yeah,
So nobody can take them from me.
you can't
I
be
own it.
canceled.
No, exactly. And believe me, if you go back and listen to some of the classic metal show stuff, I should be canceled because I definitely say some radical shit. But
Yeah,
I have an IT business, so I could probably help you with the tech stuff because I
bless you.
literally know everything there is to know about podcasting as far as the digital world. That's for sure.
Well, I need the
And
help.
well, I'll help you, man. That's fine. But then I also own the fifth largest pinball arcade in the country. So
Huh.
I have this great big, it's out right near Pittsburgh. It's called Pinball PA, and it's 420 machines on the floor that people can come in and play.
Wow.
210 pinball machines and 210 stand up Asteroids, Defender, Pac-Man, etc. Those machines.
That's
So,
fantastic, man. Well, I definitely have to come check that out sometime. I'd love to,
hell yeah, man.
because I have such great memories of the old, arcade from growing up in the 80s. Having a pocket full of quarters and going
Sure.
with my friends to the arcade at night, and playing Defender and
Mm-hmm.
Joust and all of that. I love
Yeah.
that. So,
We definitely have all that stuff, man. And the crazy thing is when you walk into the place, because like you, I'm 53, so I grew up in that era. And
mhm.
I remember the arcade the same as you do. You walk in, there was like 30 games, and you're like, oh, this is the holy grail.
Mhm.
And this place, it's literally an old Target, completely hollowed out and just full of games. As big as
Wow.
a Target, man. It's monstrous.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to travel to PA just to see that. That's
It's
about, what's it called again?
Pinball PA. It's pinballpa.com if you want to do the video tour and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, as soon as we get done, absolutely. And like I said, I might have to make a trip up there just for that, because that sounds incredible. Because
Doors open.
I've been to a few of, like, because the whole retro arcade thing is something that people are doing, and I've been to a
Mm-hmm.
few, but the one the size of a Target is just like, I can't even imagine it. So
Yeah, it's dude. Even when I go, because I live in Cleveland, so I don't go all the time. I have my
mhm,
son that runs it and whatnot. But even now, when I go, and it's mine, it's literally mine. So it's
mhm.
not like, wow, this is amazing or whatever. But I still walk in and I just stop at the door and I just look around. I'm like, Jesus, look at this place.
That's fantastic, man. Good on you for doing that, and for for being an entrepreneur, man. I really admire that. And I wish I had been more driven in that direction, when I was younger. And I'm trying to teach my son to be,
Sure.
you know, to what the I mean, he's 7, and I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
teach him what the, entrepreneurial spirit is about, and, just about, being responsible,
Sure.
and knowing that the future comes, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be prepared for it. And I didn't do the best job of preparing for mine, and I'm,
Dude,
I'm dealing with that now. So I'm trying to, teach
dude,
him
I
to be
didn't either.
better.
I'm gonna tell you straight up, I didn't either. I was a low money making nobody forever. Most of my life. I mean,
Mhm.
I really didn't break $40,000 a year until I was 40. I'm 53
Yeah.
now, so it hasn't been that long, but
Right.
I got divorced 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And in those 10 years is when I built Pinball PA. I wrote 6 books. I rebuilt the radio show. I built the podcast. Now I built a TV station with heavy metal television. It's just the last 10 years that I figured it all out and got aggressive and got busy. It's not like I've been building it since I was 20, not by
Right.
a long shot.
Well, I'm somewhat doing the same thing. You know, I've definitely decided to, you know, because I've had those moments where I think to myself, you know, God, if I could go back and be 20 again, what would I do? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just think, well, okay, you can't go back and be 20 again, but there's nothing that's stopping you from doing what you would do if you could go
Yeah.
back to being 20 again.
Mm-hmm.
And as kind of nervous as I was about starting this little enterprise and starting, you know, making paintings and doing all kinds of things on my own, as nervous as I am about that, and but I'm just so excited that I've just, you know, that I'm starting finally,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just like relying on somebody else's success to carry me along,
Sure.
which when I was in the bands, you know, it's not like I wasn't an active participant, but I was always kind of counting on somebody else's success and drive to I was hitching my wagon to another train, you know, to somebody
Mm-hmm.
else's train, and you know, I'm finally not doing that, and so I'm definitely gonna be picking your brain, you
Dude,
know, and
that's fine.
you know,
That's fine, man. I mean, I'm always game to help, and you've got it's weird because it really all comes down to just training your brain somewhat. It's
yeah,
like where you're thinking, I don't want to hitch my wagon to this or to that. You know what? You earned that. You
hmm
earned the Stuck Mojo reputation. You earned the Fozzie reputation. There's nothing that says you shouldn't take that and push it to promote your art or promote your podcast.
yeah.
Let those first 1,000 fans from those projects or 2,000 fans or whatever it is, let them come on board. Welcome them. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm a nobody, or I thought I was. And then I wrote 6 books, and every single one of them has sold over 2,000 copies.
That's
And
fantastic. What are they about?
one is about my divorce that I
Uh-huh.
wrote in real time as I was going through it. One of them was about me running around like a crazy maniac in Korea when I was in the service. One of them was, and this is the horror one. I was in a industrial accident, a pretty nasty one, like burned. I had a steel mill furnace blow up, and I took a massive burn. I took 69%, 52% third degree with grafts,
Wow.
and lived through that. 22 surgeries. Was told I was going to lose my hands and never walk again, and all this other shit. And I beat it, So I wrote that book, and then I have one book about Metallica's Black Album, and I have one book about Motley Crue's album with John Corabi, and I have one book about Judas Priest's Turbo. So I write about a lot of different shit.
That's amazing, man. It's when did you write your first book?
10 years ago.
Oh, 10 years ago. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 10 years when I was literally when my ex-wife came in the door and said she was breaking up with me, and we'd been married 23 years. So she came to
Wow.
me and just said, found another dude, I'm out. And I was like, wow. And it fucked me up pretty bad. And for some reason I just started writing about it. I just started scribbling. I don't know why. I just started scribbling whatever I was feeling day to day. And before I knew it, I had, 400 pages, and I wrote it for a year, and then I just closed the book on it and put it out.
Yeah.
And I was
So it was
amazed at
almost
how
like it was almost like you were just making a journal.
it was at first, but then it
Yeah.
really, then I crafted it a little bit and
hmm
turned it into a thing. And it's been very well reviewed, and it's done really well on Amazon and at Barnes and Noble, and I've actually gone to colleges and spoke about it and all kinds of different shit, which is and again, I still say the same thing. I'm just a dude.
Yeah.
I'm not. It's not like I'm famous. It's not like Kanye West writing about divorcing Kim Kardashian. It's some nobody in Ohio.
And it's funny because like I don't know about you. I'm a pretty big Jordan Peterson fan. I don't know if you
Sure. Oh,
know him
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And he talks about that. He says you talk to people and their lives are like novels. You know, he's
Mm-hmm.
like anybody you talk to, if you talk to them enough, they'll tell you things about themselves and tell you experiences they've had and everything that just
Sure.
will blow your mind.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, that's amazing, dude. I had no idea, you know,
Yeah.
that
No
because
one
to be
does.
honest, I don't really know you, you know. I mean,
Sure.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure. Did we meet when you used to come see the band? Did we meet after shows and stuff?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I was always really tight with Rich.
Okay.
I knew Rich. So, but dude, the one time I remember specifically about you was Rich and Bones. You guys had just gotten like a camper thing. This was on maybe
that would be in
Pigwalk,
98.
Pigwalk, or so that would have been what,
That would have
Rising?
been Rising.
Yeah. So, and I just remember Rich took me in the thing and was showing me the camper thing, and you were sitting in there, and Rich was all happy. He's like, "Oh, look at this thing! It's fucking great! It's got this, it's got that." And you were just like,
"Oh, great.
Can I not get a fucking hour's worth of rest?" You just didn't want to be bothered with the fucking camper thing. And it was like, it was just
That's
funny.
me, Mr. Nice Guy.
But you know what, dude? I get it. I've been in this business as a music guy. I was on WMMS for a lot of years here in Cleveland and 92.3 and I've met everybody, every musician in the world I've met, much like you. And I know most of the time the fans, the media, whatever, they're a bother. It's like you guys just want to you drive 400 miles to get to a gig, and then you get there and then you got some fucking asshole that's excited to see you. And you got to pretend that you're excited to see them, but you're not, because it's just another show. It's a Tuesday. You'd rather be at home watching TV or watching the kids or doing whatever the fuck instead of waiting till midnight to entertain 300 drunk guys,
Yeah. Especially back in those days when we were doing all the driving, and in particular, Rich and myself were doing the driving for the most part. So there were plenty of shows where we had, like you said, driven 400 miles, that night and day, day and previous night to get there and everything. So, well, I apologize that that I didn't really remember if we had met before. But we met when we did Toomey's podcast, and so how would you said you're not afraid to ruffle feathers, and you certainly expressed some hardcore opinions. Is that something, have you always felt that way have you always been interested in ideas or interested in politics, or is it something that came up later? I mean, tell me about your story, your evolution as far as that's concerned.
As far as politics, I think I'm like most people. As a 20-year-old, I really didn't care. As a 20-year-old, it just didn't matter to me. That said, I was in the service, so I always had that sense of patriotism, I guess. I served in the service. I did 2.5 years in Korea, and I did 2 years in California, and then I was in a bunch of other places too. So I always had patriotism. But that being said, other than in the early 90s when I was in the service and Bill Clinton started closing the bases, where that directly impacted me, I really didn't know anything about politics. I hadn't studied it or anything. It just wasn't my deal. I really didn't get into it until 9/11. When 9/11 happened, like every other person on the planet, I was glued to my TV nonstop for a year, basically, for a solid year. And that's when I really started looking into, quite honestly, I started watching some Alex Jones as well as CNN, so I'm seeing CNN telling me, well, this and that. And then I'm hearing Alex Jones, and Alex Jones is like, this is all bullshit. It's, it's a false flag. It's all, all the things that he says. But I started paying attention to it, and I started really, following it and listening to it and reading. For the first time in my life, I actually started reading stuff that was probably controversial. I was reading, there was a book called The Terror Timeline that I read. I was really fascinated with 9/11. So I read this book, The Terror Timeline, that really broke it down all the way back to the 80s and 90s of how the hatred for the US started. And I started reading that, and then it really just kind of opened my eyes to, wow, there's a lot more going on than I knew. And it surprised me, because even in the military, I mean, I was an MI guy in the military. I was an intelligence guy. And I thought that I knew everything that was going on, because I was in intel. You know, I would see things that other people didn't see. And I realized real quick that I didn't. So then I got really into it, and I, you know, paid a lot of attention to politics and started learning about it and started paying attention to elections, and not just the national elections. I started paying attention to local elections and gubernatorial elections and stuff, and seeing how money started moving back and forth and how it influenced everything. And, you know, it reached a boiling point for me with Obama. You know, I saw Obama because he was such a stark turn. You know, every other president, as much as and I've said this all the time, I think every president in my lifetime is treasonous and should be jailed on some level. There's something other than Carter. There's something you can point to with every president since Johnson, which is as long as I've been there, and probably further back than that, where you could probably charge them with something.
Yeah.
But they all played the game. They all played the game. Obama just said, the hell with the game. You know, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. I don't care if you like it. I don't care if the people like it. You know, if I don't have enough votes, then I'm going to change the voting strategy and I'm going to ram it through.
I have a pen and a phone.
Yeah. And that's when it was like, wow, we're in a different world.
Yeah.
And then Trump came around, and I'm not a Trump guy. I mean, I'm not a Trump guy because I really hated that he was on social media. And I just think social media is cancer, you know, just in general. I think it's cancer, but
yeah, well, it's definitely, I mean, to put it lightly, it has its downside for sure. I mean, it has its advantages, but it definitely has its downside.
It does. I hated that he was worried about stupid things. You know, to me, he was like the total pendulum swing of Obama. Obama was changing things so radically without any approval and without any real, you know, without any real regard for the citizenry. I felt like Trump was trying to do what was best in the citizenry as long as it made him look good. And, you know, I would see him tweeting about, you know, the ratings on Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and stuff. And I was like, dude, this is so beneath the leader of our country.
Yeah.
Don't be focused here. Be focused on thing. And he was doing a lot of great things, you know. I mean, people won't give him the credit for it, but the thing with North Korea was amazing. You know,
I agree. I mean, I was going to say, I wasn't a fan in 2016. I wasn't a fan of him as a candidate. In fact, I was pretty upset that he seemed to be, you know, like, and it was a strange phenomenon to see every time something came up that you thought, okay, that's it. His campaign is done. You know, he would just get stronger, and I couldn't understand it. I was just like, what is going on here? This is really weird. And, you know, when he won, I didn't think it was, I mean, it didn't, I didn't have the reaction that some people did. I mean, my mom is very liberal, and, you know, she told me that, like, oh my gosh, when Trump won, it was like 9/11 all over again. And I'm like, well, let's, you know,
let's dial that back a bit.
Let's put things in perspective here. But I didn't necessarily become a fan of him, but I think I understand him and his the people who supported him a little bit more once he became president, because in my lifetime, every time somebody became president, you know, the media would have, you know, this, that, or the other thing to say. It was like, you know, the end of the world that this conservative is going to become president. But as soon as they entered office, or even on the other end, you know, like, so-and-so is going to be the savior of the world if we elect them, you know, like with Obama, you know, the thrill up the leg and all that stuff. And it always seemed that once, like, every election was it was like the most important election we've ever had, you know.
Right.
And and then as soon as they entered office, it was just kind of like everything went on as usual. There were no real big changes, and everybody kind of settled down. There was a settling down, you know, and there was always, I was always used to a sort of a honeymoon period, even when the media didn't like people like George Bush or, you know, Bush Senior or Bush Junior. There was always a kind of understood that once whoever is elected and they're in office, that there's a bit of a honeymoon period where the press kind of settles down and just, and things just kind of normalized for a little while. And after Bush took office, that never happened. It was like, I was kind of surprised. It's like, wow, they're still hammering this guy, like really hammering this guy, like trying to actively undermine this guy, and that made me start thinking I need to look a little bit closer at what's going on with the media here, because I'm not a big conspiracy theorist. I don't really usually buy into broad condemnations of the system and things like that. But when I started to see, what was going on, especially now with social media, where politicians or newscasters say things, you can go check these things yourself. There was a time where you just kind of had to trust what they said. Now you can go, Trump said this, and then you can go look at the video and it's like, well, he said that, but then he said something else that puts it in a different sort of context, and you're not reporting that part. And so, and I remember seeing the meme of Trump saying, they're not after you, they're after me. I mean, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in their way. That really kind of struck me. I was like, I think he may be onto something here. And just the way the left, the Democratic Party just swung so hard to the left and so almost kind of unreasonably to the left. I was like, all right, well, I don't particularly like Trump, but I'm terrified of the left. It's like, I used to say, yes, Trump scares me, but the left terrifies me. I'd rather be scared than terrified.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is with Trump, the thing that he never did was he never threw out any dictatorial mandates to people.
Yeah.
And for the last, Obama did. Biden is certainly doing it now with his, with his statements like, you'll either wear a mask or you'll sit at home until you wear a mask, or until you get a vaccine, that type of stuff. That's dictatorial. That's not democracy. I mean,
I'm very much against the idea of the government mandating anything.
Me too. Yeah. So, well, and I mean, and like with the COVID thing, I mean, I'll tell you, I had COVID. I did 8 days in a hospital, and I quite nearly died. I mean, I was right on the verge of it last September. I mean, literally, I had a moment in the hospital where I got up for a minute to go to the bathroom, and then I had to just collapse because I started seeing the stars in my eyes. I thought I was done. Wow. I mean, I really thought I was done. And that being said, I'm still not getting a jab. There's no way. I'm making my own choice to when you got 5 years of history, then maybe I'll believe you. But people are saying, it's funny. I just talked to Tommy Vext from Bad Wolves like an hour ago. And,
oh, wow. Okay.
And he's been, he lost his gig in Bad Wolves because he wouldn't play the game. He wouldn't conform and he wouldn't play nice. And a lot of it is about the vax policies and stuff, which if you go and look him up right now, his new song is called Trust the Science. And, and I mean, he's really not playing the game. But that said, for me, somebody that had COVID, it's not that I don't trust the science. I'd love to trust the science. And I think this is where a lot of people are at right now. We get labeled as right-wing lunatics that don't trust the science. It's not that we don't trust the science. We don't trust the messenger of the science right now.
Well, that's the thing, is like, first of all, I hate the expression the science.
Yeah.
There is no the science. There's science. Science is a method of investigation. Science is an investigative technique, an investigative method.
Yeah.
And it's based on, skepticism of established ideas.
Right.
And first of all, like, unless you're a scientist, you cannot comment with authority on what the science, quote unquote, is. I can't. No one who's not a scientist, when somebody says to me like, oh, well, the science says this, it's like, you can't say that because you're not a scientist. What you're doing is you're repeating what you've heard, that's what we all do. I'm not a scientist. I can't speak with authority or certainty about any scientific matters really at all. what I can talk about is like, this is what I've read, this is what I've heard. You know, I've investigated to a certain degree, and these things make sense to me, but I'm not making any kind of declaration as to what is true or untrue, and neither can you.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. It's, you know, it's we're in again, it goes back to me, it all goes back to social media. It just everybody leans so much on, so people will give more value to the words in a meme that they don't know who created it than they will to their own brain, to taking their own time to actually, because it's easier. It requires no thought to read a meme and say, yeah, that's how I felt anyway. Boom, I believe it. You know, versus, look, science or free speech or whatever tenet you want to take to, that, you know, is kind of our society is built around. It all comes from the hard parts of it, not the easy parts of it. You know, it's great to say apple a day keeps the doctor away, you know, because everybody likes apples. You know, that's kind of easy to do. It's not as easy to do to say, you know what, if you really want to stay healthy, you got to get out there and run 5 miles a day. You got to get out there and do 400 push-ups a day. You got to lift weights every day. You know, it's not, you can't eat junk food. You got to eat, you know, vegetables and healthy. That's not as easy to say. So it's not as easy to take that tenet into your life. It's much easier to say, you know what? The stuffed mushroom or whatever at Outback tastes fantastic, so I'm going to eat that instead. You know, it's just easier, and people go for the easy.
Yeah, people are looking for simple answers to complex situations and complex questions. You know, people have a tendency, and, you know, I'm a people, so I can't, you know, I'm not trying to say that I'm above the fray or anything, but, you know, things are complex and things are complicated, and people don't like being told, like, there's this phenomenon that's happening, and, you know, the answer is live a healthy lifestyle. They don't want to be told that. They want to be told that, oh, there's this thing that I can take that'll fix the problem, and I don't have to think anymore. I don't have to think anymore about it. You know, I tell you, my whole attitude about COVID was, first of all, we had done the Fozzie cruise, like we were on the Fozzie cruise at the very end of January 2020, when this had not hit the news at all. And so we were on a cruise ship, me and my wife and my son. We were all on a cruise ship for 4 days or what have you. You know, and a cruise ship, as you know, is like a petri dish. I mean, you're in everybody's faces, and this was, you know, this is before the pandemic, so no masks. You know, everybody in each other's faces, and a lot of people, you know, some guys in the band got sick, their wives got sick. You know, I heard a lot of stories of, like, people, but we didn't know what it was at the time. I just, you know, everybody's like, yeah, I got like the flu or something. I was like really sick after I got home, and it, you know, a lot of people got sick, but it didn't surprise me that much because it's a cruise ship, you know. So I thought, you know, yeah, that's not surprising that, you know, a bug went around, and but I didn't get sick at all. You know, my wife didn't get sick at all. My son didn't get sick at all, and I would assume that most people on the boat didn't get sick. You know, a large group of people got sick, but most people didn't. And I'm not a germaphobe. I'm not one of those people. I don't wash my hands every 20 minutes, you know, like I'm not one of those people that's afraid to touch things, you know, because I'm not a germaphobe, and I'm not Mr. You know, Mr. Health guru either. I mean, I'm just a regular guy. You know, I try to take reasonably good care of myself, but I'm not one of those people that's just like, that's obsessed with health and wellness, you know. And I didn't get sick, so I just thought, okay, I've got a pretty good immune system. I'm not that worried about it. I'm generally speaking, I don't get sick that often, so in general, I'm not that worried about illness anyway. I mean, as I'm getting older, I'm worried about certain things, but not catching something, you know. So it didn't really, I didn't think much about it. And then later on, when the news started hitting about this weird new virus, first of all, whenever there's this new weird phenomenon in the news that everybody's talking about, I usually take it with a grain of salt. It doesn't, I just kind of go, you know, okay, whatever. and everybody's talking about this new virus. I mean, and I lived through Y2K. I lived through Mad Cow. I lived through bird flu. I've lived through,
right?
All those things. And when I was a kid, when I was a kid, I laid awake in bed at night thinking that I heard killer bees coming, because the whole African killer bees thing, when I was a kid. I'm sure you probably remember that, the swarm,
right?
And all these fears that turned out to be nothing. And one of my favorite thinkers, Michael Crichton, who's talked about irrational fear a lot, and how damaging irrational fear can be. And so I tend not to be a worrisome type, in terms of like the big worldwide worries, So my reaction to COVID was whatever, I'm not worried about it. I heard Dr. Drew talking about, listen, the media is blowing this way out of proportion. Take reasonable precautions, keep your hands clean. Don't touch your face if you can avoid it, and don't let this ruin your life. And when everything started shutting down, I was just in shock. I couldn't believe it. I was, when I heard that the NBA was canceling their season, I was like,
right.
The NBA's they're canceling their whole season. And that's when I knew, like, okay, I don't necessarily know that this disease is that serious a thing, but I know that we're gonna treat it like it's a serious thing. And when everything started shutting down, I just couldn't believe it. And and if I hadn't gone through the experience of being on the cruise and not getting sick, I mean, maybe my attitude would have been different. But I thought to myself, is this really a reasonable response to what's going on? Because early on, I was hearing about, like, my first concern was for my son. And very early on, I was hearing, well, this doesn't really affect young children. It doesn't seem to, at least, there's not much evidence that this mostly affects elderly people and, people with comorbidities. I mean, elderly people and people with comorbidities are in danger from most, from
everything.
From everything. Exactly.
Right.
So I just couldn't understand. It's like, what is everybody so, and I remember I was dumb enough to think that, things had been so politicized over the last several years, with Trump being president and the media just, seemingly just kind of losing their minds, and just the mask dropping off, of like the mask of objectivity gone.
Right.
I thought, well, here's something they can't politicize. How do you politicize a disease? And boy, how wrong was I?
No, you're absolutely right, man. And I'll tell you, man, as a small business owner, it was a nightmare when they started closing everything down. I mean,
I can imagine.
I mean, my pinball place, I mean, we do okay, but there ain't nobody getting rich from it. I'll just put it that way. There's nobody getting rich. We pay the bills, and then if there's anything left over, might have a dinner out of it. Some
like
months, man. I mean,
it's a labor of love more than anything else, right?
It really is. And when they started, it got highly political really, really fast in Pennsylvania. And I'll tell you, we fought the system, which was crazy at the time. Now it probably wouldn't be such a big deal, but right when it all started, and they shut everything down, we refused to shut down. I just wasn't buying it, and but it came at a big risk. I mean, we literally had to shut down our social media pages because we were just getting killed by, oh, you're trying to kill people, they're calling it the COVID-cade and the death-cade. We were getting killed from that. Meanwhile, we had two sides of it. We had the governor that was riling and this is every state. It's not just Pennsylvania, but we had the governor that was riling everybody up that they're going to die if they come out. You had that attitude. We had our state. I literally spoke to our senator in our district, and he was like, don't close down. He was like, oh, keep your place open. Do what you're going to do. I ended up calling the state police and saying, hey, if I keep my place open, are you going to come in and arrest my people? Because I didn't want my people to get it. If they want to arrest me, they can arrest me all they want. I don't care. But I don't want my staff to get arrested for my decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, no, we're not bothering with that. So we stayed open and we took our beating. But now looking around my plaza that we're in, we're one of the few that's still in business because we stood up. And there has to be a line. And this is where I'm going somewhere with this. There has to be a line between politics and logic or freedom. And the line has to start with freedom and include politics, not the other way around. It cannot start with politics and let freedom in where freedom fits into the political system.
Right.
That's
no,
nonsense.
that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. And for so many people, they adopted that thing at the beginning of COVID. They were like, well, I'm going to listen to these politicians and I'm only going to do what the politicians are telling me to do. And if that infringes on my freedom, well, so be it, because I'm taking politics first. And that's why I'm sure, other business owners that are out of business now because they closed down and they couldn't recover. And it's astounding to me. And maybe it's because I served, maybe it's not, but it's astounding to me how willing people have been through this whole pandemic and through this whole political swing of the last 3-4 years, really. So I'll even go pre-pandemic, to just sacrifice their freedoms for everything. YouTube wants to ban you from saying what you want to say. Oh, well, it's their platform. That's their business. They can do whatever they want. People are so willing to give up their freedoms, and they don't understand that eventually it's going to come for them.
Yeah.
Like I'm the biggest advocate in the world for free speech. I'm the guy that thinks free speech should never be infringed on. I don't care what you say, other than there's a fire, other than the real logical, there's a fire where you say it in a movie theater and it gets people hurt.
Right.
Anything else you say, look, the Westboro Baptist Church can't stand their message. As a former soldier, when they go out picketing soldiers that have died in combat, I want to go out there myself with a ball bat and just cave somebody's skull in.
Yeah.
And that being said, and all that being said, I would never want somebody to come over and say they can't say that. Right. I want them to be able to say that, because from a logical standpoint, it's who's deciding what you can and can't say. Go ahead.
Yeah. That's the problem. I would consider myself a free speech absolutist. Except for, of course, the things that we've for generations decided you can't say, like you can't libel people, you can't you can't slander people, you can't you can't defame, things like that. But to me, the idea of freedom of speech is the ability to be able to express abstract ideas. To be free to express abstract ideas is very different than saying that, oh, so and so is a known sex offender. It's like, that's not an abstract idea. You're actually talking about a specific person. And to me, that's where the line should be drawn. And it's still a difficult line to draw. But yeah, when it comes to just like, you should, from a legal perspective, you should be able to say, you should be able to express any idea in the abstract that you want. And this whole, this whole phenomenon now of misinformation, I hate that term, and that's what I was going to say. Like when you mentioned the Westboro, Baptist Church, as much as you may hate what they're saying, you want them to be free to say it because you want to know where people are coming from. You want to be able to decide who it is that you're going to be, who are you going to associate with and who you aren't. One of the ways you do that is by listening to them and getting an idea of what they actually believe. I want to know what people actually believe. I don't want to know what people think they think people ought to hear. I want to know what people actually believe. And
who's more dangerous, the Westboro Baptist Church or the 9/11 people, the Mohammed Attas of the world that we didn't hear anything from? We didn't hear their ideology. We didn't hear their hatred for America. We didn't hear any of that stuff. It was all underground. And to me, they're way more dangerous than Westboro Baptist Church, where you literally can tell who's doing what just by who walks in the building.
Right.
And
Who's more dangerous, the Westboro Baptist Church or the people who would censor them?
Yeah, exactly. Because what's to say you're not their next target?
Right.
Think about something as innocuous as smoking in bars. I remember when that law went into place, at least here in Ohio. They had they put the law in place where you couldn't smoke in bars anymore. And I hated that from that moment. I was like, you know what, it's the bar owner, it's their business. You're
Right.
choosing to come in their business. And that being said, I don't smoke. I never really have been a smoker. And
me either.
You spent a zillion years in a bar, so as well as I do. There's nothing worse than when you come out of a smoke-filled bar at the end of the night and you got that funk of stink from smoking on you.
Yeah.
It's awful, and you can
almost
you could taste it. It's so bad. And you take a shower and it's almost black gunk coming off of you from the smoke. I hate all of it.
Me too.
That being said, I hated more that they took that right away from the bar owner to do that, because what ended up happening once they saw that the bar owners would comply, then it became all public buildings. Then it became, then it became private businesses, all private businesses. Now they're trying to get you in your house and in your car. They're trying to control. When you give up rights, you give up control of your own right. You're not just giving up a small thing. And what's to say that cigarettes don't become alcohol?
Yeah.
Again, alcohol could be, I think you could make the same justifications for alcohol as you did with cigarettes.
Absolutely.
They're deadly.
That's what they, that's where the prohibition movement came from. We have such a clear example of what happens when, you try to prohibit, people from their vices, and when you try to do things for people's so-and-so, quote unquote, their own good. We have a very clear example of what happens when you do that. I wasn't a fan of I hate cigarette smoking more than anybody. I mean, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. But I was very much against, these ordinances that were, put down on people, because it's like, I don't think it's for you to decide. And I don't think the secondhand smoke argument held water. I mean, people just assume that secondhand smoke was bad for you. I mean, and it's an easy assumption to make, because if smoking cigarettes is terrible for the, for the person doing it, it seems like what they're breathing out into the air, at least in close proximity to other people, it, wouldn't necessarily be good for you. But from everything I understood, they couldn't ever really make the case that secondhand smoke was bad for you. So I didn't particularly like it. I have to say, I mean, if I'm being honest, I like the result in that. I like going into a place knowing that I won't have to be dealing with cigarette smoke, but
I like the result, but I don't like the precedent that it sets.
No, I don't. Yeah, that's more dangerous.
Where does it stop? Are we going to start outlawing McDonald's next? That shit's bad for you.
Yeah,
it's bad for you. There's no proof ever. There's nobody that will ever tell you that you can eat healthy at a McDonald's or a Taco Bell. It's just not going to happen. But, at some point, somebody's going to try and outlaw it. I mean, they're doing it in New York City with the level of, or the size of the cup of soda that you can buy, or the Slurpees or whatever, that, you can't buy certain size pop anymore because the governor says so. Well, who the hell is he?
Yeah.
He's somebody that works for you.
Yeah. Who is anyone to tell anyone else what they can't or can't do, unless you can make the case that you're violating somebody's rights by doing it, but you can't make the case that, if I drink a 2-liter soda, that's on me. It's like, you can't make the case that I'm violating somebody else's rights. And you can't use the whole excuse that, well, you're driving up healthcare costs or whatever. It's like, well, those healthcare costs are a decision that, that they don't drive up healthcare costs in in reality. They drive them up because we as a society, or at least the government, decided that we're going to cover certain costs, and then those costs are going to go up. But yeah, I mean, but the inclination to do that is always going to be there. It's a part of human nature. It's like there's no, when you ban something like that for someone's own good, there's no limiting principle. It's like you said, well, if you can ban cigarettes in public places, what's the limiting principle that stops you from banning, fast food? There isn't one. You're just left
or
up to
how much food. I mean, what's next? How much food? What you can buy?
Right.
What you have to weigh? What you have to intake? How much water you drink? I mean, you can go right down the line of, maybe you shouldn't drive as far. Maybe you should have to ride a bike to work one day a week. Maybe I mean, there's no limit to
there's
where
literally no limit.
Yeah, and it's the thing that I cannot fathom, and I don't know if I'm smarter or dumber than everybody else, probably dumber, but I can't figure out why people are so willing to treat politicians that are making these rules like parents. We don't elect parents. They're supposed to be representatives of us.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be dictating to us what to do. We don't knight a king. We elect somebody that we hope will represent our values.
Yeah.
And this is where I am totally off the chain with the politicians right now. First, I don't see any representation at all. None. Just one example of a zillion. You have X number of senators and you have X number of congressmen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're usually pretty split, pretty close to even between Republican and Democrat in the House or in the Senate.
Yeah.
Each state has their own representatives. So each state usually has a Dem and a Republican as, one of each party. And to me, every time I see that in my state, that the Republican and the Democrat senator voted differently, that tells me that I don't have any representation, because they're not trying to represent me. They're trying to represent their party. If they represent me or my state, I don't care how many you have for each state. They should all be voting along the line. They should be in their state, finding out what their constituents want, and then voting that with their power in the Senate or in Congress. And they're not doing that. And it just proves, this will be a radical idea, and you can tell me that I'm crazy, because a lot of people do, but I'm for getting rid of it. I'm for getting rid of the Congress and the Senate completely. Replace it with a small office, an administrative office that has, 10 people that work in it. Get rid of it completely. There's not a need for it anymore. The reason we had all this back in the day was because you couldn't send a Californian on a horse to Philadelphia, to the Capitol, then to deliver a vote. You couldn't do it realistically. Now you can do it electronically in 13 seconds. So get rid of that office, get rid of the bill, make every bill that we have electable. Let the people vote on it. Make it every first Saturday of every month is like an election day, and have the bills put up online where everybody can read them for 30 days up in front of it. And you limit what they can have. Three pages typed. Anything more than that, you don't need. You don't need 14,000 page bills. You just need, because you get all these bills now, they're all jammed up with all these other nonsensical things. You want to have a gas tax? Fine. Put in the gas tax, put what the money's going to, 3 pages typed, put it online, let people read it for a month, come in and vote. Why do we need these people that clearly prove that they don't represent us? That is nuts.
I definitely, for the most part, agree with what you're saying. I don't necessarily need that. I don't know that we need to do something as radical as get rid of the Congress necessarily, because and this is starting to get into, the nuts and bolts of how our system works. I tend to think more philosophically, so I'm speaking out of turn somewhat. It seems it's a little bit more radical than than appeals to me, because I don't tend to be radical. I tend to be a little
Sure.
bit more, reformist than revolutionary. But one thing I definitely agree with. First of all, I definitely think we need term limits. I'm absolutely, like, anybody that's running for Congress that proposes term limits, they're definitely gonna get my attention, if
Sure.
not my vote. I definitely think we need term limits. I the idea that you can make a career out of serving in Congress is just like, is nonsensical to me. To me, that one
Yeah.
seems the most obvious, is term
Mhm.
limits. I'm definitely for putting bills online. You know, um, everything that Congress passes should be available. You should be able to, and maybe it is, and people just don't pay attention. I don't know, but everything that Congress is considering voting on, people should be able to go to a website and look at it and read it for
Right.
themselves. I have I have another idea that I'd be interested to see what you think about. It's a little bit more
Sure.
of kind of a, maybe it's theater, maybe it's a funny idea, but I think it'd be effective.
Okay.
I, you know how, and I particularly thought of this when they signed the Obamacare.
Mhm.
There was a lot of talk about how the bill was like 2,000 pages long,
Yeah, yeah, some
2,400 pages,
crazy.
that it's
Yeah.
like it weighs like 24 pounds. There's
Right.
like one copy and no one's ever, I mean, because no one
Yeah.
can read it. No
You have
human
to.
being can read
Right.
it.
And you have to vote for it in order to read it.
Yeah, we have to pass it in order to find out what's in it.
Right.
I think it should be a law that, you've seen the president signing legislation. They sit at a desk and all these lovely people behind him who are there wanting to be on camera behind the president signing a bill. And he has
Mhm.
this little kind of leather binder, that he signed, the law is passed. He signs it. It should be by law. He should have to have the law in front of him on the table, and he should have to sign the last page of that bill, like
Right.
this book that's this tall.
Mhm.
And he says, I hereby attest and confirm that I have read this legislation and understand
Sure.
it. Signed, so and so.
Mhm.
And then, people would see, it's like he's signing he's signing the back page of War and Peace. It's like, and you're gonna tell me that he's actually read it and understands it?
Right.
And so, yeah, put the bills online. Maybe, like you said, legislate the length. Like, a bill can't be over a certain amount of pages or a certain amount of words. I'm all for legislating the idea that the government is not allowed to spend over a certain percentage of GDP. I think there should
Yeah.
be a limit. Like, the GDP is X. The government can't spend more than 10% of GDP.
Mhm.
Fight over it, figure it out. But no
Yeah.
increasing spending limits, no increasing the debt ceiling, all that crap. I almost think that, and, like, I'm not an economist, so somebody might laugh at me, but I'm almost thinking that, like, debt should be, for a nation, or at least ours, should be illegal. We shouldn't be in debt. We shouldn't have a national debt. You
Yeah,
know?
not as a country. Not
Mm,
as again, how come we can put some of that stuff on the individual states and on the individual people and everything, but not but somehow that all counts against the federal debt.
yeah,
As you're old enough to remember when the president balancing the budget every year, that was like a big part of his time.
right.
Was and when was the last time we had a balanced budget? Wasn't it Clinton and that it was Clinton, right? Was the
Who
last
even
time we had
who
it
even
was
knows? Because there's so many budgetary tricks that they
yeah,
use, to be able to say that they balance the budget. There's certain things in the budget that they just put off budget. It's like, all of a
sure.
sudden, this is off budget spending. There's no such
Mhm.
thing as off budget spending.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't exist. You're just lying at that point.
Mhm.
Um, so that's like, to me, something like, first of all, term limit. This is something that you can't work around. You can't, like, confuse people with a lot of a lot of technical jargon when it comes to term limits. It's like, is the guy still in office? He either is or
Yeah.
he isn't. Um, when it comes to something like balancing the budget, the budget is so huge when you start getting into the trillions of dollars. What, a politician or, a group of politicians can say, oh, we balanced the budget, well, who's gonna challenge you?
Right.
Me? Am I gonna say, I looked at the budget, it's not balanced? Who the hell can do that?
Yeah,
But
a team of economists couldn't do it. I mean, the numbers are way too big. They're too big.
That's why I'm for the kinds of measures that are relatively simple and are easy to see whether they did it or not. If we have term limits and so like has reached their term limit, they're gone.
Right.
It's like you can see they're not there anymore. They're not there anymore. You don't
Exactly.
you don't have to have a team of economists to tell you whether or not they're still in office or not.
Yeah, you got to be able to count to 8. That's it. If the number's 9, they should be out. They shouldn't get 8. They get 8 years. That's it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things like that some people think, would just sound kind of silly and, like they're nothing but political theater. But I think they'd actually be very effective. I mean, term limits to me seem like an easy one. How could anybody be against the idea that, when you're serving in Congress, there's a limited amount of time that you're allowed to serve. And when you've served that time, because we do it for the president has a term limit. Why are we so hesitant to make sure that, members of Congress have term limits? I don't understand it.
Well, I mean, you can look at you can skip the political theater and just look at day-to-day life and see a great picture of it. Just look at California. Nancy Pelosi has been in office for however many years, is 30 years, 20 years, whatever it is now. I mean, a long time. And look at California. It's completely wrecked. That should tell you something. That should tell you that your representative, the highest representative that California has in this country, is failing them, is not doing the state's business, is letting their budget go to hell, is letting their taxes be ridiculously high. That should tell you that person is out of touch with her state.
Yeah.
And that won't happen if you put an 8-year term limit on a politician. It's just not going to happen that way, because one of the things that they're going to have to do to get in position after after somebody else does 8 years is fix what's broken in those 8 years. People just let it slide now. They're just like, it's just the way it is in California. It shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that in New York. It shouldn't be like that anywhere.
People become complacent, and incumbency is a very hard thing to fight. It's hard to get incumbents out of office, particularly the longer they've been there. And it's a very strange phenomenon that you ask, from what I understand, you ask most people how they feel about Congress, how they feel about Congress in general. They feel very negatively about Congress, but they like their congressperson. It's like, oh, I like, Congress. Oh, they're terrible. This, that, and the other thing. Oh, I hate Congress. Well, how do you feel about Pelosi? Oh, well, she does a wonderful job. I like her. It's like everybody hates Congress. They hate Congress, generally speaking, but they like their congressperson, because people just don't like, people are afraid of change. It's like, people don't want to make big changes until they don't have a choice. They hit bottom, it's like, so anyway.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, dude. You won't get any argument from me on term limits. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see even the president's term limit reduced. I don't think they need more than 4 years. Yeah, I really don't. I mean, I get why, because they say that it's the whole 10-year cycle of, economic change and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? If you made it all 4 years, it would become more of a rush to do the best for the best that you can in that time. The decisions would be less dragged out and less political, because they got to happen faster, and they got to be decisions that will carry through. So the next guy that's really right on your heels won't just reverse them. You know what? And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's just the way I think it would be, is either if you shortened up the presidency and Congress and and all of it to 4 years, everybody's going to have to start playing nicer together, because because if not, their changes are going to get overturned immediately by the next crew.
You know, something that's interesting, I don't know when this ended. I'm sure it was a long time ago. Certainly not in our lifetime. But did you know that there was a time when, like, when the presidential race was run, whoever won the presidency, you know, they were the president, but whoever was their opponent became vice president, like automatically.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like the president didn't pick the candidate for president didn't pick a running mate. Their running mate was already picked. It's like, if I win, I'm the president and you're the vice president. I almost think we might need to go back to that. You know, it's like, force these assholes in a room, like, you know, fight it out. You know, it's like, you have to deal with this. Like, if you, like, when Trump and, could you imagine when Trump and Hillary Clinton were running, knowing like, okay, one of you's going to win and then the loser gets to be vice president, or like has to be, you know? But do you know Brett Weinstein?
No, I'm not aware.
He became pretty notorious. He's one of what they refer to as the intellectual dark web. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
yeah, I know of the dark web. Sure.
Yeah. You know, it's Peterson and Joe Rogan and Sam Harris and all these people. Well, Brett Weinstein is one of that kind of crew, so to speak.
Okay.
His brother Eric Weinstein actually coined the term intellectual dark web.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to look this up, but he is part of an organization that is advocating for, you know, some kind of electoral change. And they got a bunch of like a bunch of, I guess, political scientists together. I'm not gonna explain this well at all, but they came up with an idea of like who would be the best candidate from the Republican Party and the best candidate from the Democratic Party that could form a ticket.
Okay.
And what they would do would be they would each volunteer to be in the running for president and vice president, but they would decide who is going to run for president and who is going to run for vice president on a coin toss.
Oh, wow.
So they said that their calculations determined that, I don't know if this was for 2020 or 2024, but their ticket would be from the Republican side, Dan Crenshaw, and from the Democratic side, Tulsi Gabbard.
Okay.
And that they would run as a ticket. I mean, of course, they'd have to volunteer to do it, but that was like, he proposed this as like a solution, and that if they were willing to do it, they would run together, you know, Dan Crenshaw and Tulsi Gabbard, one from Republican, and when it came down to deciding which one of them would run for president and which one would run for vice president, it would just come up to a coin toss.
Wow.
And I was like, I find that very interesting, whether it would work well or not, because I like both of them. I mean, I consider myself a Republican. Not necessarily a staunch Republican, but I'm much more in line with the Republican Party than the Democratic Party. But I like Tulsi Gabbard a lot. For one thing, I mean, not necessarily. There's plenty I've heard her say that she would do legislatively that I'm not necessarily for. But the thing I like about her is her willingness to engage with the enemy, in terms of she's not afraid to talk to anybody.
Right.
You know, she'll go on Tucker Carlson. She'll go on Joe Rogan. She's not afraid she didn't have a hidden agenda. You know, she'll say what she thinks. And even though, like, I think her, you know, economic policies, I don't necessarily agree with, because I'm not a Bernie fan at all.
Right. Yeah.
And she's a big Bernie fan, but I can deal with it because, like we said, I want to know where people are coming from. You know, I want somebody in office who, even if I disagree with them, I want to disagree with them honestly. You know, I want to trust that when they say something, that they're being sincere, even if I don't like it, even if I don't agree with it. I want to be able to trust that they're doing what they're doing because they think that's what's best, even if I don't agree with it. And that's and I think that's her, and that she's like, in the 2020 election, when I was, to the degree I paid attention, she was the one Democrat that I thought, okay, because it's been a long time since I thought I could vote for a Democrat of any Democrat.
Sure.
Even though I have plenty of problems with the Republican Party, I can't imagine voting for a Democrat. I just can't. But she's like the one Democrat that I thought I could actually vote for her, and of course they destroyed her because
Right.
she wouldn't play ball,
Well, and the thing is, and we're in a cycle now that we have to break. And I think it's the most destructive cycle that we've ever, not necessarily the political cycle, but the voting cycle, I think is completely broken right now. We're voting, and I'll be the first one to admit I'm as guilty as anybody of it. I voted for Trump the both times. I voted for Trump both times. But the first time when I voted for Trump was not really voting for Trump. I was voting against Hillary, 100%.
Exactly.
And that's how Biden got in as well. I mean, unless we want to get into whole political voting fraud and all, which I totally think happened, but that's, that is what it is. But I think Joe Biden got the same kind of voting return as Trump did, with people voting just not to have Hillary. I think Biden was anti-Trump, and we got to stop that. We literally cannot be voting for our leadership based on anything but the other candidate. Because when you vote anything but the other candidate, you get what we have right now, which is a bunch of stuff that's going on that people didn't even realize that they were putting into office. I mean, as bad as Biden is, he's not doing anything he didn't say he was gonna do. He's doing just what he said he was gonna do. He's doing just what he and Obama did. It's what they started in Obama's term. He's not, he's not doing anything radically different than what he said he was gonna do. It's just people didn't realize that he was gonna do it because it was easier to vote for this knucklehead that seems safe because he was an old doddering idiot than it was to vote for the guy that was the big bad orange demon.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I agree for the most part. I just think, generally speaking, with politics, I think politics is not a good thing, but it's an inevitable thing. Politics, and just speaking of the concept, is a necessary evil. Politics is not good, but it's not like you're going to just wish it away. I mean, we're stuck with politics. I think the secret is, is to make life, generally speaking, is the least political that you can. I would say to individual people, stop looking to the political system. You stop looking to the system of politics as something that you can clean up and make work well. Because it doesn't. It's like when people talk about, like, I think we should get the money out of politics. To me, that's like getting the wet out of water. It's not possible.
Right.
Politics is a corruptive and corrosive force in our lives, but it's inevitable. So the idea is make your own life and make the lives of the people around you as less political as you can. I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but I don't know that you can vote for anything other than just the lesser of two evils, so to speak, because as long as it's a politician that you're voting for, it is, you're just trying to find which of these is going to do the least damage, And I'm sympathetic.
Hold on. The only caveat I would put to that, though, is when it's the less of two evils. When you're going as looking for the lesser of two evils and not just the other guy because you hate the first guy, that makes sense. Yeah. When you're doing it the way it was, I'm going to vote for Biden because I'm going to vote against Trump. When you're trying to throw your vote against Trump, you're not doing your diligence to figure out what is the lesser of two evils.
Yes,
you're already making an assumption of the evils, and like I said, I did that myself. The Trump versus Hillary election, it was the first time ever in an election I just didn't even care. I didn't care what Trump could have stood for mass murdering cities, and I probably would have voted for. I used to joke that I would vote for the BTK killer over Hillary because he killed less people. You know, that was kind of my running joke in that election cycle. I did no research on Trump, none. I blindly voted for him, and I regret it in a way. I mean, I don't think Trump did a terrible job, but I regret it because I literally put my life and my future in the hands of somebody that I had no idea what they were going to do. None. And that's dangerous. That's bad. And as we're seeing in the last two cycles, the last two elections and the results from it, it's really dangerous to our lifestyle. It's very dangerous to what we're doing, that so many people are casting votes for things they don't know what they're voting for. It's just dangerous.
Well, yeah, I agree. It is dangerous. The 2016 election was a really confusing time for me, because usually, you know, elections up until then, and I'm not gonna try to represent myself as somebody who you know, votes, you know, was a staunch voter and always made sure I was standing in line with my little voting card and everything. I didn't vote in 2016, and what I usually thought I would do, like when elections would roll around, my typical way of doing things was Georgia's a red state, so you know the Republican candidate is going to win Georgia. Fine, I typically would probably vote for the Republican candidate anyway, so. And so I thought, well, if I go vote, if I just bother to, because I'm not that into it, I'm probably going to vote for the Libertarian candidate, whoever that is, because I want the Libertarian philosophy, I want the Libertarian worldview more represented electorally, and I want to see a Libertarian candidate get a high enough percentage of the vote so that they would be like invited to the debates and things like that. Right. And I thought it's kind of a win-win situation, because I never thought of it as throwing my vote away. Some people would be like, you know, oh, if you don't vote for one of the, you know, if you don't vote for the Republican, you're voting for the Democrat. And it's like, no, Georgia's a solidly red state. You know, if I vote for the Libertarian candidate, at least Georgia was a solidly red state. If I vote for the Libertarian candidate, I'm not giving a vote to Hillary, because, you know, Trump's going to win Georgia. This is 2016. Of course, things have changed in the last few years. So, and that was the way I looked at it. And so when 2016 rolled around, I was like, well, not only do I not like Trump, not only do I not like Hillary, hell, I don't like the Libertarian candidate either. What was his
was that Johnson?
Yeah, Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
You know, so I was like, man, this is the best we can do. You know, this is the best the Libertarian Party can do, is this guy. So I just sat out the 2016 election, which, as I said, is not a big thing for me, because I've sat out plenty of elections, because I just thought, is it the election time? Oh, well, I don't feel like waiting in line. I'm not going to bother.
Right.
But by the time 2020 rolled around, I definitely voted for Trump. I was like, okay, by the time that election rolled around, with what had happened, you know, what was going on in 2017, 2018, and 2019, I just couldn't believe the wokeness, the identity politics, what was going on in the culture of the United States. You know, the summer of 2020 with everything going on. Like, here we have COVID, and all the businesses are shut down, and we all have to maintain 6 feet of distance from each other. But George Floyd dies, and all that goes out the window. You know, people are gathering by the tens or hundreds of thousands in large groups, but that's okay, you know, because we have to protest what happened to George Floyd. So we put the COVID rules aside, and the media was fine with it. You know, it's like Sturgis happened in September, and the media was talking about it being a super spreader event.
Right.
It's like, did you not see what was going on just a couple of months ago?
Right.
So that kind of dishonesty, that idea, that ideology, that ideological possession that was going on. I was like, okay, Trump is not a perfect guy. He's not even a good guy, maybe, you know. I mean, he's certainly not eloquent. He's certainly not a good statesman, but man, 2017, 2018, and 2019, economically, and in the fact that we weren't in a war and didn't, you know, they thought Trump was going to start World War III. They had to get Biden in office to do that.
Yeah, I know. It's and you know, we talked about this at the beginning. The North Korea thing. I can't, as somebody that's been there, I can't stress to you how major that was. I don't think the media, I think the media didn't want to do that, but I've been quite literally to that building where they showed Trump and Kim Jong-un, you know, walking. Yeah, I've been in that building. Wow. You know, and I'll tell you, it was the scariest day of my entire life. Was they took us, it was a quote unquote tour, you know, it was a sponsored tour, and they take you up to that building and they tell you up front, they're like, when you get off the bus, don't look around, don't make eye contact with anybody. If your hat blows off or anything, leave it alone. Don't go get it, because you will get shot. You know, I mean, they tell you this crazy, and you get off the bus and there are guns trained on you, and they lead you.
I would have been shot because I'm forgetful. Like, my hat blows off, I would have reached down to grab it just because I would have forgotten.
I promise you wouldn't have. You would have got off and marched in like you were in prison. You know, I mean, you literally just went into the building, and then they let you stand on one side of the table, which was the South Korean side of the table. And it's this big table, and there's two flags on it. And there's one flag that's real big, and there's one flag that's real tall. And the symbolism of it was because they almost went to war over this back in the 1950s or whatever it was. Yeah. And that was the compromise, that this flag would be bigger than their flag, but their flag would be taller than their flag. I mean, it's so stupid. It sounds dumb, but literally they were willing to kill thousands and hundreds of thousands of citizens over this. So they let us in the building, you know, to kind of see it. And then we were allowed to step onto the other side of the table. And that was our step into North Korea moment. And we did it. And it was kind of cool in a very scary way. But I'm telling you, you could feel the hate. You could feel that absolute hate. And who are we? We're just dumb soldiers that are up for a tour. Killing us wouldn't have meant anything. I cannot for the life of me imagine the leader of the free world and the intensity of that, and the intensity of
that he was taking his life in his hands.
He really did. And to show him walking in between the buildings with Kim Jong-un, and, you know, I can promise you that the media didn't show it. If you go back and look at the video, you'll see it's all real close-up shots of them. Mm-hmm. If they would have given you a wide shot, you would have seen snipers at all points of that building, you know, and he took his life in his own hands. Kim Jong-un took his life in his own hands. And you could have really seen a major war break out with one snap of a trigger, you know, either killing Trump or killing Kim Jong-un. And you could have seen US, China, Russia, Korea's, everything go crazy that fast. So what he did, that moment where he was making some progress with the North Koreans, that was amazing. I mean,
that should have been a huge story. I mean, the way the press treated that, I just couldn't believe it. Yeah. I was just like, this is world historic. This is has not happened. No president has done this. This is as significant as it gets.
Yeah. It was as significant as the signing of the peace treaty with Japan at the end of World War II.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was to that level, and they just were like, yeah, well, he still says bad things in his tweets, so we can't acknowledge it. It's like, Jesus, come on.
Yeah, I know. Like when Obama was president, and You remember Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, if I'm
Yeah.
saying his name right.
Yeah.
He spoke about how he would be willing to talk to him, right? And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people on the right were really critical of him for that, like this idea of talking to our enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And his whole approach was like, we need to talk to our enemies. It's like, this is serious stuff. We need to be willing to talk to our enemies. And the press, was treating him, like the second coming because of that, because they treated him like that, regardless.
Yeah.
But I agreed. I was like, I don't have a problem with him talking to Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. I don't have a problem with that, because it's like, you have to try. You have to be willing to, our lives are about negotiation.
Yeah.
It's like you and I negotiated just to do this. I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
a fairly simple negotiation. That negotiation
Sure.
was, hey, would you like to do this? Yes, I would. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
That's a
Let's do it.
negotiation.
Exactly.
And that's what that. So I didn't like that whole, Republican kind of point of view of like, they're like, we're not going to talk to him unless he does this, that, or the other thing. It's like, no, talk,
Yeah.
talk. You don't have to give up anything just to say, we'll sit at the table. We're willing
Mm-hmm.
to walk away from the table if we feel like it's necessary, but at least sit down first before you decide. I didn't like this whole idea of putting stipulations on, like, well, we'll go to the table with this guy when he's done this, that, or the other thing. I was like, yeah, no. I mean, it doesn't hurt to
No,
at
I
least
agree.
go to the table. You can still project strength, and you can still
Mm-hmm.
project, whatever it is you need to project by going to the table.
Yeah.
And so when Trump does the same thing with Kim Jong-un, all of a sudden the press is like, oh my God, it's so horrible. He's going to talk to our, the Kim Jong-un. He's going, like, as if just going to negotiate with this guy means that they were buddies and plotting something together. I mean, that
Yeah.
was like true diplomacy. He went into the lion's den, and
Mm-hmm.
like, and had the guts to do it, to stand up and say, like, I'm the leader of the free world. He projected strength when he did that.
Yeah.
Kim Jong-un, a guy like that, all he understands is the kind of strength that Trump projected in that
Yeah.
situation,
Well, and Trump did it on his ground instead of on Kim Jong-un's ground instead of our ground. So
Right.
as the power player, he took the less powerful stance.
Mhm.
I mean, the power play would be to have him come here. That would have been the remarkably kind of normal move.
Yeah.
And he didn't do that. He said, I'll meet you on your terms. I don't care where we meet. We need to meet. And he did it. And it was like, wow.
That shows
I
strength.
was blown away with it. That's true strength. That's true leadership. And he was totally shit on for doing it. As look at him. He's making deals with our enemies. It's like,
exactly. I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand what's going on, man. I mean, so at any rate, let's talk about something else.
okay.
Because you mentioned the whole killing babies thing at the beginning. I wouldn't. It's based on what we've been saying and the conversation we've had up till now, I wouldn't guess that would be your point of view. Tell me your point of view when it comes to something like abortion, just to get on a totally different topic.
Sure. I'm for it. I'm 1,000% for it. I don't recommend it being an easy option. I think it's lame when you hear about people that they're on their 7th abortion or whatever. On some level, I almost think that should be criminal.
Okay.
if you're that irresponsible, that should be criminal on some level, I think. But
right.
As far, who am I to determine what anybody's going to do? And that's on any topic, abortion, gayness, whatever the topic. Who am I to say, well, you can only be with this person, or you can't dictate what you do. My thing is, just don't try to lessen it by making terms that lessen what you're doing.
Right. Be honest about what you're doing.
Yeah. And that is what you're doing. You know, the minute they can tell a heartbeat, you got, you know, in my head, if there's a heartbeat, there's a life. So if you're snuffing that out, if you're vacuuming it out and ripping up a fetus and doing all that stuff, that's what you're doing. Acknowledge it. You're killing a baby. So, you know, if you're bold enough to do it, you should be bold enough to say it and not hide behind, well, I'm gonna go to the clinic and I'm gonna go, you know, and they give it the name, and you know, I'm going to the Rainbow Sunrise Clinic to have a procedure done. Get out of here with that. Admit what you're doing. You're doing something horrible. You're doing something that if you waited 5 months and did it, you would be like that Chris Watts guy. You'd be the worst killer on the planet.
Right.
But
exactly.
because you did it, you know, 3 months earlier, that makes you somehow justified and okay. That's garbage. It's nonsense.
I'm somewhat conflicted on the issue. In that, if you ask me just from a moral standpoint, is it wrong? Like not bringing in the legal, because there's any number of things that I would say are morally wrong that I wouldn't advocate for making illegal, like adultery. You know, is it wrong to cheat on your spouse morally? Well, of course it's wrong. You know, is it wrong to lead a double life? You know, behind your spouse's back? Is that morally wrong? Well, yeah. Well, then it should be illegal. Well, I don't know. You know, not everything that I would say is immoral should be illegal, because I don't believe that the government should be necessarily the arbiter of what's moral and immoral, you know?
Right.
But that aside, so I can't justify it morally, you know, but I'm not necessarily convinced that it should be illegal in all cases. And that may just be my own cowardice. That may be my own lack of strength to be able to stand up and say it should be illegal, but I'm still skeptical of it, particularly like the thing that kind of drives me crazy is when I watch people debate this issue, you know. And I love, one of my favorite things is watching the videos of people doing the kind of man on the street interview at protests and things like that. And asking like protesters their opinions and watching them try to, you know, with all this righteous indignation, and they can't even articulate a point of view. You know, I kind of, those things are kind of fun to me. But when, you know, when people talk about that, it's like, it's not really a life, you know, it's like the whole, a woman should be able to do whatever she wants with her body is, you know, like, well, that's true enough, but I don't think it applies, because we're not just talking about your body, you know, because as far as I know, you take a DNA sample you take any cell in your body, and your DNA can be determined. And if you take a cell from the fetus, it's a different set of DNA. It's not your body. You take a cell from your fingernail, from your hair, from your saliva, swab the inside of your cheek, blood, tissue, anything. The DNA will all come back with your unique DNA that indicates that you are an individual human being. That is you.
Right.
But you take a cell from the thing inside you, well, it's not you. It's different.
Right. Exactly.
It's different DNA. So it's like, as far as I know, I'm not a scientist, so I can't really say for sure, but like, that's the identifier of the individual human being, is the DNA. And it's a different DNA. So that whole argument that it's just, well, you know, people trying to tell women what to do with their bodies, it's like, that argument's been thrown out. You know, you can't use that argument now, because we've determined it's not your body, it's someone else. You just happen to be the carrier. You know, it's like you know, you're carrying this, you know, this individual human life to term. So to me, that argument just doesn't make any sense. And another thing that I think about when I talk to people about this casually, you know, all their defenses for why you should be able, and you kind of made this point, all their defenses for why abortion should be legal don't change once the baby's born. You know, like, oh, well, it'll wind up in a, you know, you want it to wind up in an orphanage somewhere. It's like, so you should kill it while it's in the womb because you don't want it to wind up in an orphanage. once it's born, it's exited the birth canal. Now it's a baby.
Yeah.
That argument hasn't changed. It's still going to wind up in a, it's the burden to the mother is no different now. It's like you're a pregnant woman thinking about, I can't raise this baby. It would have to go to, say, an orphanage or something. I can't raise it, so let's abort it. Well, the justification for aborting it didn't change once the baby is actually born. And the idea of killing a fully formed baby that's been born is completely, no one would justify it.
Right.
So I don't understand. It's like, why once it's exited the birth canal, it's an inviolate individual human being with rights. But
but
5 minutes ago, while it was inside you, it's just your body. You can do with it whatever you want.
Well, I mean, I understand where the idea comes from. I do not agree with it at all, but I do understand where it comes from. When you talk to people like that and that's their answer, it's because they're not taking it serious. It's not they're
not thinking it through.
Yeah, well, they're the same people that adopt a dog until it shits on their rug and they take it back. They're the same. They're the same exact. It's the same exact argument, really. It's
right.
It's the, well, I can't handle it, so I'm not going to have it here. That's really what that argument is. And it's not serious. I mean, if you're serious, you're wearing a condom. And if you're, do accidents happen? Of course they do. But you know what? That's part of the risk of having sex with anybody.
Yeah. And when people make the rape or incest argument, it's like, why are you even making that argument? It's like, it is what it is. The abortion is the abortion. The procedure is the procedure. You don't give people a different procedure, or you don't give people a different type of abortion based on those things. Right. It's like, it's not like, okay, well, this person is pregnant. This birthing person is pregnant. By her own choice, and this one's pregnant because she was raped, so she gets this type of abortion and this one gets this other type of abortion. The procedure is the same, and the end result is the same. So if it's like, if it's, I don't understand why you would bring that into the argument. It's either okay or it's not okay. It's either morally acceptable or it's not morally acceptable, one or the other. And if it's a rape, see, I'll take a different stand on this. If it's a rape, and I understand from the person that's been raped standpoint, they don't want to be reminded of the rape every day. I get the argument that they'll say. I'm sympathetic to the argument. Yeah.
But if that's the argument, then say what you're doing. Then admit what you're doing. Again, it comes back to the same thing that I said at the beginning.
Yes.
Don't, if you're literally willing to kill something because of the way it was conceived, meaning obviously a rape type of a situation, okay, say it. Say, I'm willing to kill this because it happened under the most heinous of circumstances. Because the heinosity of the killing is kind of almost like the equal to the heinosity of why you're doing it. Yeah. The why justifies the means. If it's just two 18-year-olds that had a bottle of Boone's Farm and fucked up in the back of their dad's car, okay, now we're talking about something completely different. You gotta step up and show responsibility.
Yeah, well, don't be euphemistic. Like you said, don't hide behind euphemisms. Say what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
My wife and I feel, the same way about this. And she showed me this article of these couple of actors in Hollywood. I won't name their names, but they were talking about when they got pregnant. They weren't married. They were just, involved with each other. And she came up pregnant and they had an abortion. And they talked about afterwards, like holding each other and comforting each other. and they said they lit a candle for the life lost.
Okay.
And I'm like, the life lost?
Yeah.
No,
Lost.
it wasn't
Life
lost.
snuffed.
It was snuffed out. It was taken.
Right.
By
Yeah.
your voluntary choice.
Mm-hmm.
How nice that you lit a candle for it. You know, it's like,
great.
don't euphemize. It wasn't a light. You weren't lighting a candle for a person that was killed in an accident or died of cancer. You know, it's like, it wasn't lost. It was taken. It was snuffed out.
Exactly.
And it's that unwillingness to deal with the reality of it that drives me crazy. It's like, listen, have your opinion. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna disparage you for your opinion, but let's be honest about what we're talking about.
Right. And I'll just tell you, while I'm not against abortion, I'm really not. I mean, and honestly, some of my arguments would be the exact things that we're talking about. It's like, if you're not going to raise a kid well, then you really shouldn't be forced to try, because you're just going to raise them to be shitheads. And there is that attitude in my head. That being said, you know how many less abortions we would have if we just called it out? If we just literally said, "Oh, so you killed a baby." If we just changed the language of it, if we literally just stopped saying, "Oh, you had an abortion, how tragic or how sad," and we just went with the real and just said, "Oh, you decided to kill your baby," you know how many people would hesitate and would at least think about what they're doing if it was presented that way all the time.
Yeah.
It would force people to have real conversations with their whoever they got pregnant with, and it would have, and family and everything else. It would almost reconstitute the family as more of an important unit in making big decisions, because you would have to live with the stigma. You would have to live with the stigma of being a killer. And that would put a lot of weight on people.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty heavy, but I mean, I find it hard to disagree. Yeah, trying to think. I had a thought. It's kind of gotten away from me. I was going to say, I'm sympathetic to the girl who to the young girl in particular, who's not even in a relationship, who's just like a teenage girl who was going out and having her fun. Maybe it was irresponsible, but I mean, I'm no saint. I did things as a young person that I thank God I didn't end up, in that situation, being a guy getting a girl pregnant who I had just been, fooling around with. I was never in that situation. And especially, a young girl who's a teenager facing what could, is obviously a difficult situation, but it's difficult because, there's an expectation of responsibility now on you, that you have, you're pregnant with a child, that there's an expectation that you're going to take the responsibility to take care of it. That's a heavy load, man. I get it.
Yeah.
I would not want to be in that position. I was somewhat in that position when, my wife became pregnant by surprise. We weren't expecting to have a kid, and we turned up pregnant by surprise. But the idea of aborting it never even entered either of our minds, and I was 47, she was 40. We were married, we'd been married. I mean, so it didn't take long before I just accepted the reality of it. And now, of course, it's like, God's greatest gift, my son. I can't imagine my life without him. But I can understand that fear when it was first confirmed to me that you're going to be a dad. I was afraid, because I had never wanted that responsibility. And at the time, I didn't want it. I was 47 years old and I wasn't ready to accept that responsibility. So for a girl who's 17, I get it. I understand what you're going through, but it doesn't change the fact that, like you said, let's be realistic about what we're talking about. You're talking about killing a human being.
Right.
You're talking about killing a human being.
Exactly. Well, on any level, what responsibility did you ever want? Just be honest. I mean, just in anything. Did you want the responsibility of having to earn a living? Did you want the responsibility of, you were in bands from the time you were a young guy.
No.
Did you want the responsibility of, well, I got to go out and be on the road for a year in order to make enough money to justify this job? I'm sure you didn't want that responsibility.
I can't think of any responsibility that I ever said, I want that responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, so to me, somebody fucking up and getting pregnant, that's part of the game. That's the same, that to me is the same as had too many drinks at the bar and crashed and killed a family. It's the same. It's the same. You didn't want what was going to come. You didn't want what comes after you do that. You get in that bar accident or accident from being at the bar, but it's what gets dealt to you and you deal with it. I think we as a society, Americans as a society as a whole, have gotten so willing to not take responsibility and not live up to our responsibilities for the actions we take, that you can pick anything out and you can point to it and say, this is somebody else's problem. And that's just what abortion is. Abortion is, this isn't my problem and it's not your problem either. We're going to get rid of the problem instead of having to deal with the absolute bad decision that we made 99% of the time. Yeah. It's not a full broad brush, but it's an almost universal broad brush. 99% of the time, it's a bad decision that people are trying to not deal with the consequences of. And that's lame.
I agree. Absolutely. And, one of the ways I like to think about things, and I think it's, I hope it's the right way to think about things, is that, there's two aspects to everything. There is, what is it we're talking about? And what do you do about it? And, we absolutely agree on what we're talking about in terms of what it is. Like, you're killing a human being. There's just you can't get around that. You can't steer around that. You can't just wish that away. Now, it's a reality that exists. People do it. People get pregnant. People get abortions.
Yeah.
How do we deal with it? How do we deal with the fact that, innocent lives are taken purposefully,
Yeah.
And the temptation is to say, well, you make it illegal, obviously, but I'm not sure that that's the proper way to go, because you're never gonna eliminate it altogether. I mean, there's laws against all kinds of things. It doesn't, there's laws against taking drugs, or at least, selling drugs, whatever, and it still happens. You have to deal with the fact that it's going to happen. So how do we end up in a circumstance where we have it happen, like the whole safe, legal, and rare, like, okay, well, how do we make it as rare as we can possibly make it? I'm not convinced that just banning it across the board is the way to do that, because the more you try to push to do those kind of things, because the simple fact of the matter is, not enough people think like we think. A lot of people do, but not enough, because here's the thing. It's like, people don't murder each other because it's illegal. You know what I mean?
Not at all.
It's not like, oh, well, I would go fucking blow that guy's head off, but I might get in trouble, so I won't. It's like, that's not how people generally are. I mean, so we have to, if we want the least amount of abortions possible, we have to win the moral argument, and we're just not there yet. And until we win the moral argument, we won't get there. And it's unfortunate, because I don't know that making it, I'm not sure that if, like, we tried to ban abortions across the board, that we wouldn't end up with actually more abortions than if we hadn't.
Yeah. It would all be it'd be backroom abortions. It would be,
there'd be all kinds of things like that, and that's not necessarily, you don't say because it will happen anyway that you just forget about it, that you just don't deal with it. It's like, well, you shouldn't, if you try to make abortions illegal, there'll still be backroom abortions. So you just forget about the whole thing and just don't worry about it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying you have to contend with the fact that those things will happen. And, you know, women will get pregnant. Women will try to get abortions, and they will die in greater numbers, you know? So it's kind of a, you know,
the only way to fix it is the way that's never going to happen, which is the unfortunate truth of it. And that's, you know, just kind of like what we said at the start of this, which is you got to put the pressure on what it is that you're doing. You
have to pressure people to be honest.
Yeah, because the honesty is what's going to keep people in check. It's people, and you know this, man, the worst thing you can do to anybody is call them a name, especially in 2022. If you label somebody, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're a whatever. If you put that label on somebody, they'll fight you to the end to prove that they're not. So if you put the label on them as a killer, as a baby killer, that's the most pressure you're going to put on somebody to not do it. You know, I mean, I hate to say it, the reason that abortion has become so prevalent and easy is the lack of the moral compass that we all grew up in. You know, there was no abortion. There was not this laundry list of people having 2, 3, 4, 5 abortions in the 60s. You know, it just wasn't happening. Why? Because everything was in a more regimented way. And I'm not advocating for that necessarily. I'm just saying that in that time period, they called things the way they were. If your daughter ended up pregnant, she might as well have robbed a bank, because it was looked at with the same disdain. And now we've just accepted it. Now it's just like, you know, I got knocked up, but I'm going to have an abortion and I can still go out Friday. You know, it's looked at without consequence. And when you look at anything without consequence, then the importance of it is lost.
Yeah. Well, there's something to be said about social opprobrium. You know, there's something to be said about the idea that, you know, because it's a limiting, it's a limiting factor. A lot of, you know, people, there's a lot of things that people would engage in that they refrain from engaging in because they don't want to face the social consequences, you know? And so there's something to be said for that. You know, but we also have to realize that, you know, we don't want to just lose people, you know, we don't want to, because like, I don't necessarily agree with the idea of calling somebody, you know, the scarlet letter phenomenon, you know, because that didn't necessarily work out so great either. I don't necessarily agree with branding people as this, that, or the other thing. I don't know that that's the right approach, but I think the right approach is what we're doing and what a lot of other people are doing, which is having conversations about things. And that might sound kind of, you know, namby-pamby. It's like, oh, having conversations, that's going to fix everything. It's like, well, actually, yeah, it will. But it's going to take time. It's not going to it's not going to fix anything overnight. We're not going to solve anything here, but you know, honestly dealing with things and dealing with them on their own terms and saying what they are, like talking about something, like not being afraid to talk about things, you know, like we're talking about it, what a lot of people would consider a taboo subject. I don't think there should be any taboo subjects.
I agree. Totally agree.
And I think that's, you know, that's how we're going to make a better world, is by, that's the one thing I would say that I feel pretty confident about, is like, there shouldn't be any subjects that are taboo. There's nothing that people should say, oh, we don't talk about that. No, I think that's the wrong approach. And so I think we need to, you know, try to influence people to speak honestly. And in exchange for speaking honestly, we shouldn't shame people for saying what they believe, you know? You know, we can disagree, but we shouldn't, you know, people shouldn't feel afraid to say what they think. And I think we're on the path for that, but unfortunately, the residue of having something as revolutionary as social media hitting us as quickly as it did, I just don't think I don't think evolutionarily human beings are ready for something like social media, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're seeing the downside of, like, because there was, think about the Industrial Revolution. I don't think anybody could disagree here. However many hundred and something years later, 120 or so years later after the
Right.
Industrial Revolution, I don't think anybody could agree that it wasn't a good thing. The Industrial
Sure.
Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
uh, 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 generally speaking, altogether on the whole, but it had its terrible effects on people.
Sure.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because we were a largely agrarian society for thousands of years, and then all of a sudden, in the space of
Yeah.
almost the blink of an eye, things changed so rapidly. There were people who couldn't keep up. There were a lot of people who,
Mm-hmm.
suffered greatly because their livelihoods were taken away because, people farmed the land. That's how people lived. And now fewer and fewer people were required to farm the land. Machines took it was like the rise of the machines in a literal sense. And
Right.
so I think we're going through the same thing now with social media, in that I think down the line, maybe it'll take another 40 years or so. Maybe I won't even be around for it. But I
Sure.
think the technological information revolution we're experiencing now is going to be a good thing, but it's going to claim its victims. It's going to take its pound of flesh. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what we're going through now, is we're going through the sorting out period, and it's going to be, I think it may get uglier before it gets better, but maybe I'm just an optimist, but
It
I tend to believe it's going to get way, way better. It just may take a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it really, and the weird thing with social media is, on one hand, I actually think it is kind of leveling out. I don't know about you, but I see just in general a lot more people posting a lot less, and B, posting a lot less of their everyday mundane stuff. You know,
Yeah.
you're not seeing as many, hey, here's my dinner tonight posts anymore. You almost never see those anymore.
Yeah, I've
It's
never understood that one.
Yeah, well, but there's always people that were doing it, and that has settled down. The I honestly think that the make or break with social media is going to be this metaverse thing, because if people are, and the only reason I say this is because I knew a bunch of people 10 years ago that got into the metaverse when they had that second life out there.
Mhm.
And I knew people that were just throwing money, actual physical dollars, into their second life and not focusing on their main life.
Hmm.
And and now when you're going to have the whole Oculus thing where it's going to feel like you're in a, more of a second prism of life, where you can literally almost, it's like a digital do-over of your life. I see that is going to be, if it takes off, it's gonna really get people to stop caring about what they do day to day. Because as long as their second life is good, then they feel like they're accomplishing. The
I
flip
don't know
side to
how
that is the
I don't know
flip
how to
side
feel
is
about all that.
oh, I hate it. I just hate it. But the thing that I'm looking at is, what is going to happen. There's 330 million people on this planet, or in this country rather. There's 330 million. If they all get into their whole second life, they're not all going to be successful in their second life, just like they're not all successful in this life. What is going to happen to the people that fail twice? What is going to happen to the people that aren't good at real life and aren't good in their play life? Those
Yeah.
people are going to be a mess. And
Yeah.
and we're encouraging that by having this whole world that's developing, that's like a fake world. And I honestly think it's going to be the demise of social media. Personally, I think what's going to happen with social media is it's going to devolve to where it should have never gotten past, which is, it's a place for celebrities to promote their thing and to have a little bit more interaction with their audience. But I
Mhm.
don't think I don't think past that. I don't think day to day it's good. I just don't. I don't think that. I think we know far too much about what our people are thinking, and it's ruined lives, it's ruined friendships, it's ruined families. There was always something to be said about the old argument of we don't talk about religion amongst friends. You know, we all have different opinions on it, and we just never talked about it. That was the way we dealt with it. Was, you know, you knew it was going to be a fight if you brought it up at Thanksgiving dinner. So you kind of were like, well, let's just talk about the Lions and the Cowboys today. You know, that's what you did. And, you know, there's no value in knowing everything about everybody. It's the only person that gives value to is the person that's trying to profit from it. And it's dangerous.
Wow. Well, man, I have to say, we've talked for 2 hours, and I think we've had a good and I really want to do this again. I hope you're up for
Sure.
doing it again.
Whenever, man.
All right. Well, Chris, you're my inaugural guest. I don't even know what I'm gonna call my podcast. If you have a good idea, let me know. But as far as I'm concerned, this was everything I could have hoped for. And I'm hoping to take it all the way. And I really appreciate you being my first guest. And we'll definitely do it again, because
Absolutely, dude.
There's hours and hours more of stuff I want to ask you about.
Absolutely. Dude, I can talk. I think you figured that out. I can go.
Well, hey, but you know what? That's good, because I can too. And, I'm looking forward to doing many more of these, man.
Absolutely, dude. Door's always open. Just hit me up anytime, and just give me a little more than 5 minutes of advance on it. But I can usually, I work at home, so I can usually do these. So,
well, I'm so glad you were able to just jump on and do this in 5 minutes. And for me, that's kind of what it made it exciting. Like,
sure.
Hey man, let's just get on. Let's do a podcast. So Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing it.
Hey, no problem, brother.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Take care.
All right. You too.
All right. See ya.